If Canada became a state, what would happen? Let's find out. Well, welcome to Politics Enhanced. Thank you all so much for clicking on today's video. And today we're going to take a slight deviation from American politics. We've been talking a lot about 2024 and Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, you name it. And today instead, we're going to visit our friends up in the north. And yes, I'm talking about Canada. And specifically, what would happen if Donald Trump or the United States bought Canada and added it to the Union. We're going to talk about the political ramifications of doing so, but also how the country would look, how it would change. But before I begin, I kindly ask that you please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss another video. And of course, let's get started. So Donald Trump has talked about buying Greenland, Canada, and the Panama Canal. And personally, I think that buying Canada and Greenland is a bit outlandish. I don't really think it's possible. And frankly, I don't think that Canadians or people of Greenland would want to join the United States. That's just my personal opinion. However, I do think Trump is being very strategic about the Panama Canal, but I'll get to that in a different video. So in a hypothetical situation, let's say that Canada is brought into the United States, and in 2028, Canada gets the right to vote in the US election. So first and foremost, I don't think that Canada alone would become the 51st state. And the reason why I say this is if that happened, it would be an absolute doomsday scenario for Republicans. And I'm going to show you, I apportioned the provinces based off of the electoral votes. And mind you, this might be wrong, I'm not sure. But Canada as a state, if it was one state, they would get 72 electoral votes. That would be bigger than California. They would be the biggest state in the Union. But I don't think that Canada as a whole would become a state. Rather, I think instead of one state, there would probably be multiple states, or the provinces would become states. So you would see Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, Ontario, I could go on. All the provinces would become their own states. And theoretically, I think this would be the most likely scenario. I don't see Canada becoming one state. It would be too hard to govern, and it would just have too much power and influence over American politics, especially if Trump was making this deal. I don't think he would hurt Republicans by doing that, and adding Canada as one state would be harmful to Republicans. It would essentially be adding an extra California, and that's already given us plenty of trouble electorally. So let's fill in the map, and we're going to talk about the lower 48 states, and then we're going to talk about the provinces. So if Canada became a state, I don't see why the southern continental states would necessarily become Republican or Democrat. I don't think they would really change. So we're just going to assume that they stay the same electorally and that we still have our swing states. Texas obviously would be Republican, even if Canada joined. Georgia would probably also be a swing state in the future. I'll talk about that in another video. But these are the states that voted Republican and Democrat in the 2024 election. Of course, we can't forget Alaska. They're a part of America too. So looking at the map, Republicans would barely win in the Electoral College because in this map, you would have 610 electoral votes and Republicans would need to win 305, which actually would be a tie. So technically, it would be 306 electoral votes needed to win the White House. And looking up north, we're not really sure how these provinces would vote, but assuming that they got rid of the multi-party system and it was just Republicans and Democrats up in Canada, I do want to show you guys some recent Canadian elections that would help us gauge how the provinces would vote. And we're going to go back to the most recent election back in 2021. And obviously Trudeau won, we know he won. But if you look down below at the provinces, in this map, blue means conservative and red means liberal. So it's the inverse of what we know as Republican and Democrat, at least by color. So as we can see in this map, Alberta and Saskatchewan would be very heavily conservative. And we see Manitoba and British Columbia they would still be conservative, but less so. These would be probably lean Republican states in our timeline. And if you look at the Yukon territories in the north, everywhere else in Canada would be liberal. And obviously, Ontario would be the biggest state added to the Union. And according to my math, it would be about 18 electoral votes. So that would roughly be one Pennsylvania. But if we're going to fill in the map based off of these election results, let's say that Alberta and Saskatchewan are Republican states. Hypothetically, I said that these two would both be equivalent to about 10 electoral votes. So that would help the Republicans get to 322 electoral votes. Let's also say that British Columbia, which I think is also 7 electoral votes, in addition to Manitoba, also voted Republican in this scenario. Now, Manitoba would be worth 4 electoral college votes. And the Northern Territories, which are very sparsely populated, if they were counted as a state, they would each get 3 electoral votes. So that would be 9 new electoral votes for the Democrats. Now, if we go down south, we would have Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and various other Canadian provinces. These would be closer to Maine, and that would mean that they would probably be more Democrat-leaning just because they're near New England, and I'm sure the culture is very similar. I think also, if I'm not mistaken, there's a lot of French-speaking people in this part of Canada, but don't quote me on that. I don't know my Canadian geography as well as I should. So looking at the map, Republicans would be at 333 electoral votes, and Democrats would be at 247. So that leaves us with Ontario and Quebec. And Ontario would be the big Democrat state that would be added, so that would be an additional 18 electoral votes. And then for Quebec, that would be an additional 12 electoral votes. Probably would be a lean Democrat state, but I'm not going to fill in margins in this scenario. So if we zoom out, we look at the map, we see a whole lot of new Republican and Democrat states, and the Republican states really wouldn't influence the election results that much. It wouldn't really balance out Ontario and Quebec, but Republicans would run into a serious problem if this happened. And the reason why I say this is assuming that the Republican candidate, whoever it is, let's just say it's J.D. Vance, for example, if he pulls off Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. The problem is you need those states to win. You still need the Rust Belt trio in this scenario in order to win the White House. Now, the conservative provinces would be a slight cushion, but you'd still need Wisconsin and you'd still need Michigan. And even with Canada and its provinces, the most powerful state would be the state of Pennsylvania, or really any swing state needed to get to 305 electoral votes. If you lose the Rust Belt, Democrats would win because they have Ontario, they have Quebec, they have the Northern Territories, and maybe Republicans would make a play, right? Maybe they would try to go for the Yukon Territory since it's closer to Alaska, or maybe they would even add the Yukon Territory to Alaska. But Alaska is an interesting state, and actually it helps us understand Canada because the whole reason Alaska is a Republican state is not because of the rural boroughs, as they call them, in the northern region. It's because of Anchorage, which is a city. So in the Yukon Territory or these northern territories, they would probably be Democrat because they don't have major population centers. Yukon has about 45,000 people, which is not a lot of people if you think about it. But they would get 1 additional House member, 2 senators, a governor, you name it. I'm not even going to talk about how that would affect the balance of power in Congress, but that would definitely be much harder for Republicans to win the House because all of these small territories here would each have 2 more senators and 1 more House representative, which in this scenario would likely be Democrat leaning. However, Republicans would also probably gain at least 4 conservative senators and 2 conservative House members. However, we run into another problem, which is British Columbia and Manitoba are not guaranteed as conservative states. If we look at previous elections, let's go back to 2019, for example, we can go down and see that, yes, British Columbia and Manitoba are conservative, but they lean conservative. They're not very conservative. And I'm looking at the seat results right now, and obviously Saskatchewan and Alberta would be safe Republican. They would really help the Republican Party out the most, but British Columbia, Manitoba, not so much. And if you go back to 2015, which was a liberal wave, we can see that all of Canada, or pretty much most of it, voted for Trudeau. So that's why I say that British Columbia and Manitoba would definitely be swing states in this scenario. So let's say the Democrats or whoever runs in 2028, they would probably make a play for Manitoba. They would probably make a play for British Columbia. And realistically, the map could look something like this if you lose the Rust Belt. But hypothetically speaking, if you lose most of Canada, which is likely because there are a lot of liberal pockets in Canada as well. It's a left-leaning country. I'm not sure how they would fare in American politics. You would still need to win the Rust Belt handedly. You would need the Rust Belt trio to really pull off a victory in the election and win the White House. That's also not even including the fact that some states might flip. If you lose Michigan, for example, and it's 15 electoral votes, you barely hold on by just 2 electoral votes. So it would really up the stakes for the Republicans. And actually, despite contrary belief, adding Canada as a state would harm the Republican Party electorally speaking. It would not be good. That doesn't include the fact that, let's say you lose Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, but you win the Rust Belt, you'd be in a serious trouble. Maybe even if you pulled off Manitoba and British Columbia, you'd be at 290 electoral votes, which could happen. That would win you the election normally, but the threshold would be 306 electoral votes in order to win the election outright. I don't think Arizona's going to trend Democrat anytime soon. I think we've turned a corner in the state of Arizona, but still, North Carolina, Georgia, they could very well be Democrat-leaning states. Even if you win Georgia and North Carolina, then you're back up to winning. And next, I want to talk about how the Senate would look under this new map. I wasn't sure how to go about showing this, but pretty much we're going to fill in the Republican Senate seats and then the Democrat Senate seats. And this might be a little bit off, so bear with me, but we're going to only fill in the Republican and Democrat Senate seats, which some will be split, obviously, but we're just going to have to make do with what we have here. And we have most of the Southwest as Democrat seats. You have the Northeast, the Rust Belt, unfortunately has a lot of Democrat seats. Now we have the 53 Republican senators. Now, if Canada became a state, that would give us an additional 26 senators to worry about. And that would give us a total of 126 Senate seats in our Senate chamber. And that would also spell trouble because, as you can see, the threshold to get to a majority would be much higher than 51 Senate seats. So obviously in this scenario, Saskatchewan and Alberta would definitely have Republican seats, so that would be an additional 2 Senate seats for the Republicans. However, Ontario, that would definitely be 2 Democrat seats. Quebec, same deal, 2 Democrat seats. All of these little areas would probably be 2 Democrat seats, and that would just help them take control of the Senate. That would give Democrats a very nice cushion to retake the Senate. And as you can see, they're almost there. And 63, I guess, would be half in this scenario. But that's not even including Manitoba and British Columbia. Democrats would automatically retake the Senate. And let's say hypothetically that Manitoba gave us 2 Republican senators and British Columbia also gave us 2 Republican senators, you would still be 4 short of having the majority. You would need to go to one of the northern territories and try to get one of the Republican seats back. And even still, that wouldn't be enough. You could also go to Wisconsin. You could try to get more Republican seats in the Rust Belt, and then it would be a 63-63 tie, and then you would need one more Senate seat from somewhere on the map. Maybe in 2028 we do flip Georgia, and that becomes Republican. And as you can see, you would need 64 Senate seats to really have a majority in the Senate, and it would just make it that much harder for the Republicans to reclaim the Senate. So adding those 13 additional states would not be good for the Senate. Hypothetically, in this map, let's say we don't buy all of Canada and we only take these 4 provinces here. That would certainly help the Republicans. If we look at the 2024 election map, Republicans would be at 312 electoral votes, Democrats at 226. We know this. But then the additional provinces would give us 21 electoral votes. So in this scenario, then that would absolutely help the Republicans. And you would see Republicans get 333 electoral votes to the Democrats' 226. And at that rate, you could potentially even lose the Rust Belt and still win in the Electoral College. You could even lose Nevada and still hold on in this map. So all in all, I don't think this would be a good idea, because at that rate then when Democrats take office, they would just say, well, we want to add Puerto Rico and DC as states, and it would be never ending with the states and territories that we would add. And it would alter the landscape of the country in such a way that I think eventually America would become unrecognizable. We would probably start acquiring land in Africa, South America, even Europe or Asia, you name it. And I don't think that would be a good thing. So all in all, while it's fun to dream about having all that land up in northern Canada, potentially we could add 1 or 2 provinces. That might be okay, but I don't think this is a good idea. And I think that Trump and the Republicans should focus on other issues like getting the Panama Canal or building the border wall on the southern border. So thank you all for listening to this. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Comment down below if you want to see more hypothetical new state additions to the Union. Let me know if you want to see a video about Puerto Rico or Guam. But thank you all for listening to this video, and I hope you all have a very good day. And until next time, Politics Enhanced out.